Welcome to today's Explainer. So, picture this. You're just walking down the street, maybe cutting through a local park or strolling past a stray dog, and suddenly you get this eerie, undeniable feeling that you are being watched. And I don't mean just a blank, empty stare. I mean studied, maybe even judged. Well, today we're exploring a deeply fascinating and honestly kind of unsettling reality about the world around us. See, we often walk through nature assuming we're just, background noise to the wildlife, totally unnoticed. But the truth? The truth is a whole different ballgame. Animals are definitely watching us, and more importantly, they're remembering us.
Okay, let's dive into this. Do animals actually remember your face? It honestly sounds like the setup for some sci-fi thriller, right? But it's cold, hard science. Today, we're going to look at the undeniable evidence that you are not just some random shape moving through the world. To the animal kingdom, you are a highly specific, highly recognizable individual. You're literally leaving a legacy with the animals you interact with, whether you realize it or not.
Section 1. Nature's Longest Grudges.
To really wrap our heads around how deep this goes, we've got to start with a terrifying story of a memory gone totally wrong. Picture a peaceful college campus. A researcher is just out taking a simple walk when, out of nowhere, a crow hurls itself right at his head, screaming in his face. Then another one dives, and another. Pretty soon, it's an absolute frenzy of feathers and talons. But here's the crazy part. The crows weren't actually after the man himself. They were relentlessly attacking a specific rubber mask he was wearing. If he took the mask off, they ignored him completely. Put it back on, the screaming dive bombs returned instantly. And this number really highlights the sheer scale of what was happening. On a single walk across that campus, 47 out of the 53 crows he passed broke off from whatever they were doing just to come after him. 47! This wasn't just a random bird having a bad day. This was a highly coordinated, targeted strike against one specific face. So, what on earth did this face do to deserve such massive retaliation?
Well, here is the absolute unbelievable part. 8 years prior. 8 years! For a face recognition study, a researcher wearing that exact same mask trapped 7 crows, held them briefly, and then let them go completely unharmed. That was the entire crime. Just a few minutes of stress almost a decade ago. Yet, this turned into an inherited grudge. That's a negative memory or targeted hostility passed down from one generation to the next, almost like a dark family heirloom. Most of those 47 crows attacking him today were never even trapped. Many of them weren't even alive when the original incident happened. The original birds actually taught their chicks exactly which face to hate, and then those chicks taught the next generation. When one crow starts screaming, the others fly in, see the face, and literally learn who the enemy is right there on the spot. I mean, they have hated this one human face for longer than most human friendships last. And the wildest part is, most of them have absolutely no idea why.
Moving on to Section 2. Beyond birds, reading the face.
Let's see how this builds, because it is not just hyper-intelligent crows that pull this off. We actually see the exact same pinpoint memory in animals we routinely underestimate. Like, think about the common pigeon. People often write them off as, flying rats, assuming they're just way too simple to notice anything about us. But to that pigeon on the sidewalk, you are absolutely not just part of the scenery. In a really brilliant park experiment, researchers tested a local, totally untrained flock of wild pigeons. One keeper was gentle and fed the flock. The other was cruel, repeatedly chasing them away. Once the pigeons learned exactly who was who, the researchers decided to switch roles to try and trick them. And to make it even harder, they actually swapped their reverse-colored jackets. So, could the pigeons still tell them apart? Easily. They kept their distance from the one who used to chase them, totally ignoring the brightly colored clothes. They weren't reading the jackets at all. They were reading the human face.
But reading a face is one thing. Reading a mood is an entirely different game. Researchers actually showed a group of horses a single photograph, literally just a printed picture, of a person making an angry face. Hours later, that exact person walked into the stable in the flesh, acting completely calm with a totally neutral expression. The horses? They were not fooled. They watched this new person incredibly warily, deliberately turning their heads to study them specifically with their left eye. Because get this, the left eye is wired straight to the part of the horse's brain that handles threats. From just one photograph of a bad mood, these horses decided to keep a permanent eye on this human. They literally hold your worst moment against you before you have even spoken a single word.
Now you might be thinking, okay, birds and mammals, they have complex brains, so sure, of course they remember. But what about an animal with an entirely different biological operating system? Let's talk about the totally alien anatomy of an octopus. We're talking 0 bones, 3 hearts, blue blood, and most incredibly, a brain that isn't centralized at all, but literally spread out throughout its arms. It is about as close to an alien life form as we have on this planet. Surely, a creature with a mind so profoundly unhuman would just ignore us, right? Well, wrong. They can absolutely pick your specific face out of a crowd.
In one lab setup, octopuses met 2 keepers in identical uniforms. One of them fed the octopuses. The other poked them with a bristly stick. Very quickly, the octopuses started reaching out affectionately for the nice keeper, while completely shrinking away from the mean one. And then, they actually started fighting back. They began aiming a hard, targeted jet of water right at the keeper they disliked. In a totally different facility, an octopus seemingly took offense to one specific staff member for absolutely no obvious reason and would soak her with a blast of water straight down the back of her neck every single time she walked past. I mean, just imagine a creature so biologically foreign looking up from its tank and thinking, ugh, not you again.
Which brings us to our next section, the pivot, bonds of kindness.
Up to this point, we've looked mostly at grudges and warnings, but let's take a breath and slow down for a second. Because memory, this incredible evolutionary camera inside the minds of animals, it cuts both ways. And this is where the human-animal bond becomes truly beautiful. A crow doesn't just keep a list of enemies, it also keeps a list of the people it loves. Take Seattle, for example, where a 4-year-old girl named Gabby started feeding the crows in her yard. Every single day, like clockwork, she left scraps on her way to the bus and made sure the bird bath was full. Now, most people who feed crows just end up with, more noisy crows in their yard. But these crows actually started paying Gabby back. They began leaving her these incredible little treasures on the feeder. Beads, buttons, a shiny earring, a beautiful shard of polished glass, and even a tiny piece of metal stamped with the word best, looking exactly like half of a best friend bracelet. But the absolute most stunning moment, when Gabby's mother lost a camera lens cap in a nearby alley, it turned up days later, sitting right there on the feeder. The crows found what their human family had lost and brought it home. To those birds, Gabby was not just some random kid. She was a deeply, deeply valued face.
Section 4. A memory built on love. So we've seen that animals remember the faces that hurt them and the faces that feed them. But this brings us to a really profound question. Just how long can a memory like that actually last? To find the answer to that, we have to look at the animals whose minds are closest to our very own. This is where we uncover the absolute deepest layer of the human-animal bond. Chimpanzees and bonobos, they read faces almost exactly the same way we humans do, and they almost never let a face go. When researchers showed apes photos of old groupmates and former human caretakers, their attention locked straight onto the familiar faces. In fact, one bonobo successfully picked out relatives she had not seen in 26 years. 26! That is the longest face memory ever recorded in any animal besides us. They have even recognized specific humans after decades apart, even when half the human's face was hidden behind a mask. A quarter of a century later, and your face is still sitting safely right there in their mind. But the most powerful memory doesn't just come down to the number of years. It really comes down to connection. Let's look at the incredible journey of Christian the lion. Back in 1969, 2 young Australians bought a lion cub and raised him in a city basement. I know, wild, right? But lions grow, and pretty soon they had to do the absolute hardest thing imaginable. They had to give him a wildlife. In 1970, they handed him over to conservationist George Adamson out in the Kenyan bush, hoping to teach this city-raised cub how to actually survive. A full year passed. Christian was a massive, completely wild male now, leading his own pride, hunting his own food. Against all advice, the 2 men flew out to Africa to see him. Everyone told them it was a literal suicide mission. A year in the wild is a lifetime for a lion. He might not know them. Or much worse, he might charge.
The men climbed onto a rock and just waited. Christian approached them slowly, keeping his head low, stalking them exactly the way a wild lion studies a stranger. For a moment, nobody even dared to breathe. And then, the lion stopped pretending to be wild. He broke into a full sprint, rose up onto his massive back legs, threw his huge paws right over their shoulders, and aggressively pushed his head into their faces like some overgrown 300-pound house cat. He knew them instantly. Even his wild lionesses, who had never trusted a human in their lives, let the men walk right up, all because Christian had decided these humans were family. A full year of the harsh, wild savanna hadn't even touched the part of his heart that remembered the men who raised him.
When you walk down the street today, to most people, you're just a passing blur, gone the exact second you turn the corner.
But remember, that is only the human perspective. A crow might actually know your face. A pigeon might recognize the exact way you walk. The kindness you showed to a stray animal years ago might still be perfectly logged in its memory, just as clearly as someone else's cruelty. You were never interchangeable to them. So the next time you get that weird feeling you're being watched by something out there in the trees or on the sidewalk, well, you're probably right. Somewhere out there, an animal is still keeping score. So the question is, what kind of face will they remember you for?